Hey, welcome to our explainer. Today, we're jumping into a really complex topic, women's rights in Islam. Our source material paints a picture full of, well, some pretty stark contradictions. We're going to look at claims of incredible progress from way back when, right alongside stories of modern-day oppression. So let's dive in and see what's really going on here.
So let's kick things off with something that might surprise you. According to the source material, Islamic tradition was actually one of the first to let women keep their own family name after getting married. Think about it. That's a right that many women in the West didn't get until centuries later. Kind of feels like a progressive place to start, right?
But wait a second, because right after that, our sources hit us with this. In some places, under certain interpretations of Islamic law, if a woman reports a rape and can't produce 4 male witnesses, she can be the one who ends up in jail for adultery. And that, right there, is the huge contradiction at the heart of everything we're talking about today.
And here's just one more example from the sources to really set the stage. The power dynamic in divorce, it's presented as incredibly lopsided. For a man, it can be as simple as saying 3 words. For a woman, it's often a long, drawn-out legal battle. You see, these contrasts are what we're here to unpack.
So that brings us to our first section, a faith of contradictions. We're going to put these claims and paradoxes right next to each other to try and get a clearer picture of this tension that the source material lays out.
What's so powerful about this is how it just lays the conflict bare. On one side, you have this historic right that seems to preserve a woman's identity. But on the other, you have this alleged modern restriction on her most basic freedoms, to work, to get an education, to even travel, all depending on a man's say-so. It's a really stark contrast.
So how in the world do you make sense of all this? Well, our sources suggest we've got to go back to the beginning. So for Section 2, we're interpreting scripture and history. We'll be taking a critical look at some of the foundational texts and figures to see how their interpretations are shaping things today.
To get to the bottom of this, the source material points us to a specific number, 11. This is the number of wives that the Prophet Muhammad is said to have had at one point. And this isn't just presented as a historical fact, it's used as the starting point for a critique of those relationships and what came after.
And this quote right here is the crucial point, according to the source. There was a rule in the Quran that said the Prophet's wives could never remarry after he passed away. The argument being made is that this rule essentially sentenced these women, some of whom were only in their 20s, to a lifetime of widowhood.
And this is where the source material presents a really sharp critique. The Prophet Muhammad has this title, a mercy unto mankind, but that's put right up against these claims about his actions, leaving young women as lifelong widows or supposedly making a deal with an older wife to stay married but not visit her. The question that's posed is pretty direct. Where was the mercy in those particular situations?
Okay, so let's shift gears from history and interpretation to what's happening right now. This brings us to Section 3, Voices and Lived Experiences. Because, these debates aren't just academic. The source material shows how they play out in the real lives of women today.
This is a pretty blunt conclusion from an American travel vlogger who's featured in our source material. She actually went to Afghanistan to see the situation with her own eyes. And that was her takeaway. No ambiguity. Her experience gives us a very specific and deeply troubling modern-day case study.
And the specific rules she lays out, wow, they are just devastating. It's actually illegal for women to be on TV or radio, banned from praying in mosques, no education at all after the 6th grade. Even simple things we take for granted, like going to a park or a gym, that's gone. This list just paints such a grim picture of daily life.
But it's the personal stories that really hit home. Listen to this. This quote comes from a woman's testimony shared in the source material. She tried to get help from the police to escape an abusive partner, but instead of helping her, they arrested her and put her in a cell. It's just a chilling story of a system completely failing someone.
And her story just leaves you with this awful question, one that comes directly from her testimony. Is this a system where, if you have power and connections, the abuser can just get away with everything, while the person who needs help gets punished? That's the powerful and, frankly, scary implication.
Okay, but it's really important to add some nuance here. The sources are careful to say that the Muslim world isn't just one single thing. And that brings us to Section 4, the spectrum of belief in law. We're going to explore some of the huge distinctions within the faith and across different countries. And here is a super important distinction that one of the speakers makes. There's Islam, the religion, the personal faith for billions of people. And then there's Islamism, a political ideology that wants to force one very specific, rigid interpretation of Islam on everybody through the law. The speaker makes it clear their issue isn't with the faith, it's with this political movement.
If you want a real-world example of how fast things can change, our sources point to Iran. Before 1979, under the Shah, there were these major legal reforms that gave women a lot of rights. But then, after the revolution in '79, the source explains how all those gains were just reversed. The Ministry of Women was shut down, the hijab became mandatory. It's a stark reminder that rights can be given and they can be taken away just as quickly.
And all of this brings us to our final section, an unresolved question. We've reached the end of our explainer, but we haven't reached a simple answer. We're left with that same deep tension we started with. It's a conflict that is very, very much still unresolved.
And really, it all boils down to this. This is the core conflict presented in our source material. You have a faith that claims compassion is one of its highest ideals, and you have that set against a reality for many women that is described as one of cruelty and injustice.
So, we're going to end with this question, which is a direct quote from one of the speakers. It's not an answer, it's a challenge, a call to action really, aimed at half of the faithful. And it leaves all of us thinking about what real allyship and real justice would actually look like. Thanks for joining us for this one.